I'll give you $50,000 to pretend you love me? The powerful CEO's shocking deal pulled a struggling single dad into her world. But when the act turned real, his heart shattered in front of everyone. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The autumn wind whistled through the streets of Willow Creek as Ethan Carter unlocked the front door of Carter's Diner at 5 a.m. sharp. The familiar jingle of his keys echoed in the pre-dawn silence. His weathered hands, marked by years of kitchen work, trembled slightly as he flipped on the lights, casting a warm glow onto the worn checkered floor. "Daddy, can you help me with this math problem?" Lily's small voice carried from her usual corner booth, where she sat surrounded by textbooks and colored pencils. Her dark curls fell forward as she bent over her homework, her face scrunched in concentration. Ethan's exhaustion melted away at the sight of his daughter. "Sure, sweetheart. Let me just get the coffee started first." He moved behind the counter, his movements automatic after 15 years of the same morning routine. The coffee maker gurgled to life, filling the diner with its rich aroma. Walking over to Lily's booth, he noticed her breathing seemed a bit labored. "Did you use your inhaler this morning?" Lily nodded without looking up. "Yes, Daddy. 2 puffs, just like Dr. Matthews said." Ethan's heart clenched. Dr. Matthews. Another bill he couldn't pay. The stack of medical statements sat hidden in his office drawer, each one a reminder of his failing as a provider. He pushed the thought aside and focused on Lily's math worksheet. "Okay, let's look at this fraction problem," he said, sliding into the booth beside her. The vinyl seat squeaked beneath his weight, another small repair he couldn't afford to make. The morning light gradually brightened outside as Ethan helped Lily with her homework. Sarah, his longtime waitress, arrived at 6, her familiar footsteps, accompanied by the sound of rain, beginning to patter against the windows. "Morning, boss," Sarah called out, hanging her rain jacket on the coat rack. "Morning, sweetie," she added, ruffling Lily's hair as she passed. "Morning, Sarah," they answered in unison, making Lily giggle. Ethan returned to the kitchen to start prep work, but Sarah followed him, her face etched with concern. "Ethan, about Friday's paycheck." He turned to face her, forcing a reassuring smile. "I know, Sarah. I'll have it for you, I promise." The lie tasted bitter in his mouth. Sarah nodded, but her worried expression remained. She'd been with him since the beginning, through his wife Marie's illness and after. She knew him too well to be fooled. As Ethan chopped onions for the morning's hash browns, his mind wandered to the letter that had arrived yesterday. The bank's threatening words swam before his eyes: final notice and foreclosure proceedings. 30 days. He had 30 days to make things right or lose everything he and Marie had built together. The morning rush came and went, if you could call it that anymore. A handful of regulars, mostly retirees, nursing cups of coffee and sharing town gossip. Each empty table felt like another nail in the diner's coffin. By the time Lily's school bus honked outside, the rain had picked up considerably. Ethan helped her pack up her books and pulled her raincoat tight around her shoulders. "Button up, sweetheart. I don't want you catching a cold." Lily hugged him fiercely. "Love you, Daddy. Can we have spaghetti tonight?" "Love you too, princess." And yes, spaghetti it is. He watched through the window as she ran to the bus, her purple backpack bouncing with each step. The day dragged on, each hour bringing fewer customers than the last. By evening, even the regulars had dwindled away, driven home by the intensifying storm. Thunder rolled overhead as Ethan wiped down tables and counted the day's meager earnings. Sarah approached him as she hung up her apron. "You sure you don't want me to stay and help close?" "No, go home to your kids. It's nasty out there." He pressed a few crumpled bills into her hand. Not nearly what he owed her, but all he could manage. "It's not much, but..." She squeezed his arm. "We'll figure it out, Ethan. We always do." After Sarah left, Ethan stood alone in the quiet diner, listening to the rain hammer against the roof. The neon open sign cast a red glow across the wet parking lot, reflecting off the puddles like spilled paint. He walked to the front door, ready to turn the sign to closed, when headlights cut through the downpour. A sleek black car, something expensive and foreign-looking, pulled into the lot. The engine cut off, but for a long moment, nobody emerged. Ethan's hand hesitated on the sign. The diner's warmth beckoned behind him, while the storm raged outside. Any other night, he might have pretended not to see the car, might have flipped the sign anyway. But those bills on his desk, Lily's medical expenses, Sarah's worried face, they all pushed him to wait. Through the rain-streaked windows, he watched as the car's door finally opened, and a figure stepped out into the storm. The massive raindrops instantly soaked the stranger's expensive-looking coat, Lightning flashed, illuminating the parking lot for a brief moment, and the figure hurried toward the diner's entrance. Ethan stepped back from the door, his hand dropping away from the open sign, waiting to see who would cross his threshold on this stormy night. The bell above the diner door chimed sharply as a gust of wind swept in, bringing with it a woman who seemed to belong in a glossy magazine rather than a small-town diner. Charlotte Hayes stood in the entrance, her designer suit darkened by rain, her blonde hair slightly disheveled but somehow still elegant. Water dripped onto the worn welcome mat as she surveyed the empty diner with keen brown eyes. Ethan set down the pot of fresh coffee he'd been about to pour into his daughter's hot chocolate. "Welcome to Carter's," he said, grabbing a clean towel from behind the counter. "Quite a storm out there." Charlotte accepted the towel with a graceful nod. "Thank you. I wasn't expecting to find anything open at this hour." Her voice carried the crisp authority of someone used to being listened to. "Have a seat wherever you'd like." Ethan gestured to the empty booths. "Coffee's fresh." She chose a spot at the counter, carefully arranging herself on the red vinyl stool. Her expensive leather briefcase found a dry spot by her feet. Coffee would be wonderful. From her corner booth, Lily sneezed, drawing Charlotte's attention. The girl quickly covered her mouth with her elbow, just as Ethan had taught her. "Bless you, sweetheart," Charlotte said, her professional demeanor softening for a moment. "Thank you," Lily replied with a shy smile before returning to her homework. Ethan placed a steaming mug in front of Charlotte, along with cream and sugar. "Can I get you anything else? Our kitchen's open. Just coffee for now." Charlotte wrapped her manicured hands around the warm mug. "I'm Charlotte Hayes." She paused as if expecting recognition, but Ethan's face remained pleasantly neutral. "Ethan Carter, that's my daughter Lily over there." "Hi," Lily called out without looking up from her math problems. A sharp buzzing sound cut through the quiet diner. Charlotte pulled out her phone, glancing at the screen with a slight frown. Excuse me, I need to take this." She stood and walked a few steps away, but her voice carried in the empty space. "Yes, I understand the board's concerns." "No, I'm handling it. Of course I'm taking this seriously." Her tone grew increasingly tense. "My personal life has nothing to do with my ability to." "Yes, I'll have an answer by the next meeting." She ended the call with more force than necessary, her composed facade cracking slightly. When she returned to her seat, Ethan was wiping down the already clean counter, pretending he hadn't overheard. "Everything okay?" he asked, refilling her cup without being asked. Charlotte stared into the fresh coffee. "Not really, but that's business." She took a sip, then watched as Ethan moved to help Lily, who was struggling with a particularly difficult equation. "See, sweetie, if Jenny has 3 times as many marbles as Tommy, and Tommy has 12. His voice was patient, gentle. Lily's face lit up as understanding dawned. "Oh, so that means Jenny has 36 marbles." She beamed up at her father, who ruffled her hair affectionately. Charlotte observed this interaction with intense interest. She noted how Ethan's worn work shirt was still crisply ironed, how the diner, though obviously struggling, was spotlessly clean. When Lily had another small coughing fit, she saw the flash of worry cross Ethan's face before he covered it with a reassuring smile. The storm outside grew louder, rain hammering against the windows. Lightning flashed, and Lily counted under her breath until thunder rolled across the sky. 1, 2, 3, 4. Charlotte's phone buzzed again. This time she just stared at it, her knuckles wide around her coffee mug. She seemed to be wrestling with some internal decision. Finally, she looked up at Ethan, who was arranging clean mugs behind the counter. "Mr. Carter, just Ethan is fine." "Ethan." She took a deep breath. "I'm going to make you an unusual offer, and I need you to hear me out." He paused in his work, sensing something important in her tone. "I'm listening." Charlotte glanced at Lily, then lowered her voice. "I'll give you $50,000 to pretend you love me." The coffee pot in Ethan's hands froze midway to the counter. He stared at her, certain he had misheard. Outside, lightning split the sky again, illuminating Charlotte's dead serious expression as thunder shook the diner's windows. Morning sunlight painted long shadows across Willow Creek Elementary's brick walls as Ethan's old pickup truck rattled to a stop in the drop-off lane. He hadn't slept much, Charlotte's strange offer playing on repeat in his mind all night. "Got your inhaler, sweetheart?" Ethan asked, turning to face Lily in the back seat. She patted her pink backpack. "Right here, Daddy, and my emergency one's in the front pocket, just like always." "That's my girl." He managed to smile, though his stomach churned with worry. "Have a great day at school." Lily leaned forward and kissed his cheek. "Don't forget to make those chocolate chip pancakes for Mrs. Wilson today. She loves them when she's feeling sad." "How do you know she's sad?" I just do. Lily shrugged, her small shoulders moving beneath her too thin jacket. Like how I know you're worried about something. Ethan's heart squeezed. Sometimes his daughter's perception scared him a little. I'm fine, sweetie. Now scoot, don't want to be late. He watched until Lily disappeared through the heavy school doors, her dark pigtails bouncing with each step. The morning drop-off routine felt different today, weighted with the echo of last night's conversation. Back at Carter's diner, Ethan had barely unlocked the front door when he spotted the familiar black car pulling into his lot. His hands trembled slightly as he flipped on the lights and started the coffee maker. Charlotte Hayes strode in like she owned the place, today wearing a crisp navy pantsuit that probably cost more than his monthly revenue. She chose the same booth as last night, setting down a leather briefcase that looked like it cost more than his truck. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," she said, her voice clear and confident. "I trust you've had time to consider my proposition?" Ethan grabbed a clean mug and the fresh pot of coffee. "I've considered it, Miss Hayes. The answer is no." She accepted the coffee with a slight nod but didn't touch it. "You haven't heard the details yet." "I don't need to." He wiped down the already clean counter, needing something to do with his hands. "I don't sell myself, or my dignity. Dignity doesn't pay medical bills, Mr. Carter." Charlotte's words were sharp but not unkind. "Yes, I did my research. Your daughter's condition requires frequent treatments. Insurance only covers so much." Ethan's jaw tightened. "My family's finances are none of your business. Everything is my business when I'm considering an investment." She opened her briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. "Your diner is 3 months behind on its mortgage. You've maxed out 2 credit cards paying for your daughter's medications. The local hospital has sent 3 collection notices. How did you—" "I'm very good at what I do, Mr. Carter." Charlotte spread the papers across the table. "And what I do is survive in a world that's determined to see me fail." A familiar wheezing sound from the kitchen doorway made Ethan's heart stop. Tommy, his morning cook, stood there supporting Lily, who was struggling to breathe. "Found her outside," Tommy said quickly. "School nurse sent her home. Air quality warning today." Ethan rushed to his daughter, helping her into a booth and pulling out her inhaler. Lily's small hands shook as she took 2 puffs, her chest heaving with effort. Charlotte watched silently, her coffee forgotten. The only sound in the diner was Lily's gradually steadying breath. "Better?" Ethan asked softly, rubbing circles on his daughter's back. Lily nodded, though her face was still pale. "Sorry, Daddy. Miss Peterson said it wasn't safe for me outside today." "Don't apologize, sweetheart." He kissed the top of her head. "Tommy, can you take her to the break room? Let her rest on the couch?" Once Lily was settled, Ethan returned to find Charlotte standing by the booth, gathering her papers. "The board of directors questions my ability to lead because I'm single," she said quietly. "They see me as unstable, uncommitted. In their eyes, a woman needs a family to be truly trustworthy." Her lips curved in a bitter smile. "Ridiculous and outdated, but that's the reality I'm dealing with." She pulled out a business card, setting it on the table. "You have what I need: a wholesome image, small-town values, and most importantly, a beautiful daughter who clearly adores you. I'm offering you a solution to your problems, Mr. Carter. $50,000 for a few months of pretend devotion." Ethan stared at the card, his principles warring with practicality. "And what happens when the charade is over?" "We part ways amicably. You get your life back, debt-free. I get my company's confidence and security." She gathered her briefcase. "Think about it. Not for your pride. For her." The bell chimed as Charlotte left, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and the weight of an impossible choice. That evening, after serving the last customer and cleaning up, Ethan carried a sleeping Lily up to their small apartment above the diner. He tucked her in carefully, making sure her inhaler was within reach on the nightstand. Sitting on the edge of her bed, he pulled out his wallet. Behind a faded photo of his late wife smiled up at him. Next to it, a stack of unpaid bills competed for space with Charlotte's business card. The embossed letters caught the dim light. Charlotte Hayes, CEO, Hayes Enterprises. Lily's breathing wheezed slightly in her sleep, and Ethan's heart ached. Her next specialist appointment was in 2 weeks, and he had no idea how he'd pay for it. The diner's register held barely enough to cover tomorrow's food delivery. He looked at his daughter's peaceful face, then back at the business card. Charlotte's words echoed in his mind. "Call me when reality outweighs pride." The bills and the cards sat side by side on the nightstand, a stark reminder of his impossible choice. Lily stirred in her sleep, clutching her worn stuffed rabbit closer, and Ethan remained there, caught between his principles and his desperation. as the night grew deeper around them. The diner's morning rush had ended when Ethan finally pulled Charlotte's business card from his wallet. His calloused fingers traced the embossed letters. Charlotte Hayes, CEO, Hayes Industries. The cream-colored card felt expensive, like everything else about her. He glanced at the pile of bills on his desk in the back office. Medical statements, utility warnings, and bank notices created a mountain of worry that seemed to grow taller every day. Lily's latest asthma attack had landed them in the emergency room again, adding another $5,000 to their debt. With a deep breath that felt like surrender, Ethan picked up his phone and dialed. Charlotte Hayes speaking. Her voice was crisp, professional. "Miss Hayes? This is Ethan Carter, from the diner." "Ah, Mr. Carter." He could hear the smile in her voice. "I've been expecting your call. Shall we meet to discuss terms?" The word terms made his stomach clench. "Yes, I suppose we should." "Excellent. My suite at the Willow Creek Inn, 2 o'clock. Don't be late." She hung up before he could respond. Ethan spent the next few hours in a daze, mechanically flipping burgers and refilling coffee cups. He left his assistant manager in charge, changed into his best flannel shirt, and drove to the inn, the fanciest building in their small town. The lobby's marble floors and crystal chandeliers made him painfully aware of his worn boots. The elevator ride to the top floor felt like ascending to another world entirely. Charlotte opened the door before he could knock. She wore a tailored black pantsuit that probably cost more than his monthly income. "Right on time. Come in." The suite was larger than his entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the mountains, and modern artwork adorned the walls. Charlotte gestured to a leather armchair while she took a seat behind a makeshift desk. "I've prepared a contract." She slid a thick document across the polished surface. Standard confidentiality agreements, terms of engagement, and payment details. Ethan picked up the contract, his hands slightly trembling. $50,000 for pretending to be your boyfriend? For 1 month of public appearances? Charlotte corrected, her tone businesslike. "Board meetings, corporate events, charity galas. You'll need new clothes, of course. I'll handle that. We'll need a convincing backstory for how we met." "The truth won't work? A CEO falling for a small-town diner owner during a chance encounter?" Charlotte's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. "It's a bit too romantic comedy for my board's taste. We'll say we met through a mutual friend at a charity event." Ethan flipped through the pages, most of the legal language swimming before his eyes. "This seems complicated." "It's quite simple, actually." Charlotte leaned forward, her manicured fingers laced together. "You accompany me to events, act affectionate but appropriate, and support my image as a well-rounded executive with a stable personal life. In return, you receive $50,000, half now, half upon completion." The amount made Ethan's head spin. It would cover Lily's medical bills with enough left over to keep the diner afloat. Still, something felt wrong about the whole arrangement. "What about Lily?" he asked. "What about her? She's part of my life. If I'm supposedly dating you." Charlotte nodded, as if she'd anticipated this. "She can be included in some public appearances. A man devoted to his daughter would actually enhance the image I'm trying to project." She paused, adding more softly, "But she can't know the truth. Children that age can't keep secrets well." Ethan's conscience pricked at the thought of lying to his daughter, but then he remembered her latest asthma attack, how helpless he'd felt watching her struggle to breathe in the emergency room. "I need to be clear about something," Charlotte said, interrupting his thoughts. "This is strictly business. No real feelings can be involved. It would complicate things unnecessarily." "Of course," Ethan agreed quickly, perhaps too quickly. "Just business." Charlotte pushed a pen toward him. "Then shall we begin?" Ethan stared at the contract for a long moment. Everything in him rebelled against the idea of selling a lie. But Lily's face floated in his mind, her bright smile, her unwavering trust in him to make everything okay. With a heavy sigh, he picked up the pen. "Where do I sign?" Charlotte efficiently flipped to the marked pages, pointing to each line requiring his signature. When he finished, she handed him a cashier's check for $25,000. "We should practice," she said, standing. "Get our story straight. How long have we been dating?" 3 months, Ethan suggested, trying to focus despite the surreal situation. "Perfect. Long enough to be serious, not so long that people wonder why they hadn't heard of it before." Charlotte paced the room. "All business." "Our first date? Dinner at somewhere fancy?" "Le Petit Jardin in the city. It's exclusive enough to be believable, but not so high profile that anyone would remember not seeing us there." They spent the next hour rehearsing their fabricated romance, Charlotte drilling him on details like they were preparing for a corporate presentation. What he liked about her determination and intelligence, what she loved about him, his authenticity and devotion to family. Their first kiss, a moonlit walk after dinner. By the time Ethan left the suite, his head was spinning with memorized details and his pocket was heavy with the check. But as he rode the elevator down to the lobby, his heart felt equally heavy. He'd solved one problem by creating another, and somewhere deep down, he knew this arrangement would cost him more than just his pride. The afternoon sun hit his face as he stepped outside, and for a moment, he considered turning back, tearing up the check, and forgetting this whole crazy idea. But then his phone buzzed with a text from his assistant manager. Lily's school had called. She was having trouble with her breathing again. Ethan clutched the check tighter and hurried to his truck. Sometimes, he reminded himself, a father's love meant doing things he never thought he'd do. The gleaming glass doors of Willow Creek's most upscale boutique swung open as Charlotte led Ethan and Lily inside. The store's pristine white walls and polished marble floors made Ethan feel out of place in his worn jeans and faded plaid shirt. "I've never been in here before," Lily whispered, her eyes wide as she took in the racks of designer clothes. She held tight to Charlotte's hand, something that hadn't gone unnoticed by Ethan. Charlotte smiled down at the little girl. "Well, we need to find you both something special for tonight's dinner. The board members can be." She paused, choosing her words carefully. They noticed details. A saleswoman approached, her smile brightening when she recognized Charlotte. "Miss Hayes, what a pleasure to see you again." "Hello, Susan. We need a complete outfit for Mr. Carter here, and something lovely for Miss Lily." Charlotte's professional tone was warm but commanding. Ethan shuffled uncomfortably as Susan circled him with a measuring eye. "Perhaps a charcoal suit? Classic cut, nothing too bold." While Susan disappeared into the back, Lily tugged at Charlotte's sleeve. "Can I try on that sparkly dress?" She pointed to a pale blue party dress with subtle sequins. "Of course, sweetheart." Charlotte's face softened as she helped Lily select her size. "The changing rooms are right over there." Ethan watched in amazement as his daughter twirled in front of the mirror, Charlotte kneeling beside her to adjust the hem. They looked so natural together, like they'd known each other for years instead of days. "Daddy, look!" Lily spun again, the dress catching the light. "I feel like a princess." "You look like one too, kiddo." Ethan's throat felt tight. He couldn't remember the last time he'd been able to buy Lily something so nice. After trying on several suits, Ethan emerged in a perfectly tailored charcoal ensemble that made him almost unrecognizable to himself. Charlotte's eyes widened slightly as she took him in. "That's perfect," she said, her professional mask slipping for just a moment. The company dinner was held in the grand ballroom of the Willow Creek Hotel. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables dressed in white linen. Ethan's new shoes squeaked slightly on the polished floor as they entered. Board members gathered around them almost immediately. Ethan recognized their type from Charlotte's descriptions: wealthy, skeptical, and ready to judge. "So this is the man who's captured our Charlotte's heart," said an older gentleman with silver hair. "Richard Montgomery, head of the board." Ethan shook his hand firmly. "Ethan Carter, sir. It's a pleasure to meet you. And who's this lovely young lady?" A woman in an expensive red dress bent down to Lily's level. "I'm Lily." His daughter gave a small curtsy in her new dress, making several board members chuckle appreciatively. Throughout dinner, Ethan played his role with natural ease. He spoke about his diner, his love for cooking, and his life as a single father. He noticed how the board members' initially rigid postures relaxed as the evening went on. Charlotte sat beside him, her hand occasionally finding his arm or shoulder in perfectly timed gestures of affection. But something in her eyes had changed. There was a warmth there that hadn't been present during their rehearsals. Lily charmed everyone at their table, sharing stories about school and her artwork. When she started coughing slightly, Charlotte immediately produced an inhaler from her purse, one she must have brought just in case. The drive home was quiet, with Lily dozing in the back seat of Charlotte's car. The lights of passing streets cast moving shadows across their faces. "You were wonderful tonight," Charlotte said softly. "The board was impressed, especially with how you handled Richard's questions about small business management." "Just told the truth?" Ethan replied, glancing back at his sleeping daughter. "Mostly." A small voice came from the back seat, heavy with sleep. "Mommy says you're my daddy." The car seemed to freeze in time. Charlotte's hands tightened on the steering wheel, and Ethan turned to look at Lily, but she had already drifted back to sleep. Charlotte cleared her throat softly. "Children say the strangest things when they're tired," she whispered, but her voice held an unfamiliar tremor. When they reached home, Ethan carried Lily to her bed, carefully removing her shoes and tucking her in without waking her. He stood in the doorway afterward, watching her peaceful face in the soft glow of her nightlight. The evening replayed in his mind. Lily's instant connection with Charlotte, the way she'd reached for her hand throughout the night, how naturally Charlotte had responded to every need. His daughter hadn't bonded with anyone like this since her mother passed. He touched the doorframe lightly, his new suit jacket feeling suddenly heavy on his shoulders. The pretense they'd created was becoming something else, something that could hurt Lily far more than any financial struggle ever could. In her sleep, Lily smiled slightly, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit, the same rabbit that Charlotte had helped her pick out during their shopping trip, insisting on buying it when Lily's eyes had lit up at the sight of it. Ethan stood there, watching his daughter sleep, knowing that tomorrow would bring new complications to their carefully constructed arrangement. But for now, he let himself feel the weight of it all, the gratitude for Charlotte's generosity, the fear of what was developing, and the undeniable reality that their pretend family was starting to feel very real indeed. The company dinner had gone better than anyone could have expected. As they stepped out of the upscale restaurant into the cool evening air, Ethan couldn't help but marvel at how naturally everything had unfolded. The valet brought Charlotte's car around, its sleek black surface reflecting the golden glow of the street lamps. Lily had fallen asleep in the back seat almost immediately, her new dress slightly wrinkled but her face peaceful. The soft hum of the engine filled the comfortable silence as Charlotte drove through the quiet streets of Willow Creek. Ethan watched the familiar storefronts pass by, his mind replaying moments from the evening. The way Charlotte had laughed genuinely at his stories about the diner, how she'd touched his arm when introducing him to the board members, the soft looks she'd given Lily when the little girl charmed everyone with her innocent questions. "You were amazing in there," Ethan said quietly, careful not to wake Lily. "The way you handled everything, it felt so real." Charlotte's hands tightened on the steering wheel, her knuckles turning white. The warmth that had been present all evening seemed to drain from her face, replaced by the cool, professional mask he'd first encountered in the diner. "That's because I'm good at what I do, Ethan," she replied, her voice clipped. "Making people believe what I want them to believe is part of my job." Ethan shifted in his seat, suddenly uncomfortable. "I just meant the way you were with Lily. How natural everything felt with the board members." "Don't confuse this for real, Ethan," Charlotte cut him off sharply. "This is business." The words hit him like a splash of cold water. Ethan leaned back against the leather seat, feeling foolish. Of course it was business. He'd signed a contract, hadn't he? There was a check in his account proving exactly what this arrangement was. Charlotte continued driving, her profile rigid and focused on the road ahead. The easy companionship of minutes ago had evaporated, leaving behind an awkward tension that filled the car. "I didn't mean to imply," Ethan started, then stopped. What could he say? That he'd forgotten for a moment this was all pretend? That watching her with his daughter had made him imagine possibilities that clearly didn't exist? "Let's be clear," Charlotte said, her voice controlled and professional. "The board members needed to see a certain image, and we delivered that image perfectly. That's what they paid for. That's what we executed. Nothing more." Ethan nodded, looking out the window at the passing trees. The moonlight cast strange shadows across the dashboard, and he focused on them rather than the ache forming in his chest. "The next event is the charity gala next week," Charlotte continued. "All business now. We should review the guest list beforehand so you're prepared. I'll have my assistant send over the details." "Right," Ethan managed. The gala. They pulled up to his modest house, the porch light he'd left on creating a warm yellow glow. Ethan got out and carefully lifted Lily from the back seat. She stirred slightly, but didn't wake, instinctively wrapping her arms around his neck. Charlotte stayed in the car, her hands still gripping the steering wheel. The interior light highlighted the sharp lines of her face, all traces of the warm, engaging woman from dinner completely gone. "Thank you for the ride," Ethan said quietly, closing the door with his hip while balancing Lily. Charlotte gave a short nod. "My assistant will be in touch about the gala preparations." Without another word, she drove away, leaving Ethan standing in his driveway with his sleeping daughter and the bitter taste of reality in his mouth. The taillights of her expensive car disappeared around the corner, taking with them any lingering warmth from the evening. As he climbed the porch steps, Lily stirred against his shoulder. "Daddy?" she mumbled sleepily. "Shh, princess, we're home. Did Charlotte leave?" "Yes, sweetheart, she had to go." "Oh," Lily sighed, already drifting back to sleep. "I like her, Daddy. She smells nice." Ethan swallowed hard, fumbling with his keys. "Remember what we talked about, Lily Pad? This is just pretend. like when we play Tea Party. But Lily was already asleep again, her steady breathing against his neck, a reminder of what was real and what truly mattered. Inside, Ethan carried her to her room, carefully removing her shoes and tucking her into bed, still wearing her new dress. He'd deal with the wrinkles tomorrow. In the quiet of his kitchen, Ethan poured himself a glass of water and leaned against the counter. The events of the evening played through his mind like scenes from someone else's life. The elegant restaurant, the impressed board members, Charlotte's perfectly orchestrated performance of affection. "This is business," he whispered to himself, repeating Charlotte's words. The glass felt cool against his palm, grounding him in reality. He had a contract to fulfill, bills to pay, and a daughter to protect. Whatever foolish notions had begun to form during dinner needed to stay firmly in the realm of pretend, where they belong. Tomorrow, he'd go back to his diner, serve coffee to his regular customers, and try to remember that in the real world, CEOs don't fall in love with small-town widowers, and pretending otherwise was just another part of the job he'd been paid to do. The weekend brought crisp autumn sunshine to Willow Creek. Charlotte Hayes' Mercedes looked distinctly out of place among the pickup trucks and well-worn sedans in the diner's gravel parking lot. She adjusted her casual designer sweater, the most informal thing she owned, before pushing open the door, its familiar bell chiming above her head. The diner buzzed with Saturday morning energy. Every red vinyl booth was filled with locals sharing plates of golden pancakes and mugs of steaming coffee. The aroma of bacon and maple syrup wrapped around her like a warm blanket, so different from the sterile air of her corporate office. Ethan looked up from behind the counter, surprise flickering across his face. He wore a white apron dusted with flour, and his rolled-up sleeves revealed strong forearms. "Charlotte? I didn't expect to see you today. Just checking on my investment," she said smoothly, though they both knew the contract didn't require weekend appearances. She slid onto an empty stool at the counter, watching him work. "Dad makes the best chocolate chip pancakes in the whole world." Lily appeared beside Charlotte, her face bright with excitement. She wore a tiny apron that matched her father's, complete with a name tag written in crayon. "Is that so?" Charlotte couldn't help but smile at the girl's enthusiasm. "Order up," Ethan called out, sliding plates along the counter with practiced ease. He moved with grace despite the morning rush, calling customers by name, remembering their usual orders, asking about their families. Mrs. Peterson, a silver-haired regular, touched Charlotte's arm as she passed. "Your man's a treasure, dear. Always sneaks extra bacon onto my husband's plate, even though his doctor said no." She winked and shuffled to her usual booth. Charlotte felt her cheeks warm at the words, "Your man." She watched as Ethan helped 8-year-old Tommy Wilson carefully carry a heavy tray to his mother's table, his large hands steady and patient over the boy's smaller ones. "Want to help me make pie?" Lily tugged at Charlotte's sleeve, breaking her reverie. "Dad says I'm the best assistant baker." "Oh, I don't," Charlotte began, but Lily's hopeful expression made her pause. "Well, perhaps just for a moment." In the small kitchen, Lily showed her how to crimp the edges of a cherry pie, their fingers working the dough together. Charlotte couldn't remember the last time she'd gotten her hands dirty like this. Her own childhood kitchen had been a showcase, never used except by their private chef. "You're doing it wrong," Lily giggled, adjusting Charlotte's clumsy attempts. "Like this, see?" Charlotte found herself laughing, actually laughing, as flour dusted her expensive sweater. Ethan appeared in the doorway, carrying empty plates, and stopped short at the sight. Something warm and unfamiliar flickered in his eyes. The pie came out slightly lopsided, but golden brown. When Lily insisted Charlotte try a piece, the tart sweet cherries and buttery crust melted on her tongue. She couldn't remember the last time food had tasted this good. "Not bad for your first try," Ethan said, his voice gentle. Their eyes met over Lily's head, and for a moment, Charlotte felt something shift in her chest, like a key turning in a lock she didn't know existed. The moment broke when her phone buzzed. Another email from the board. Charlotte straightened her spine, smoothing her expression into its usual professional mask. "I should go. Thank you for the baking lesson." Later that night, Charlotte paced her penthouse, unable to sleep. The lights of the city sparkled below her floor-to-ceiling windows, but instead of their usual comfort, they felt cold and distant. She could still smell pie on her clothes, still feel the warmth of the small-town diner. Her reflection in the window looked strange to her. Designer pajamas, perfectly styled hair even at midnight. In the diner's kitchen, with flour on her nose, and Lily's small hands guiding hers, she'd felt different. Real, somehow. Charlotte turned away from the window, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling. This was business. she reminded herself firmly. The contract, the appearances, the whole charade. It was all just another corporate strategy. But as she lay in her king-size bed, surrounded by expensive sheets and carefully curated decor, sleep refused to come. Instead, her mind kept drifting back to the diner, to Lily's infectious laugh, to the way Ethan's eyes crinkled when he smiled, to the strange, uncomfortable feeling that maybe, just maybe, she'd been missing something all along. The digital clock on her nightstand blinked 2:47 a.m., its red numbers accusing in the darkness. Charlotte rolled over, pulling a pillow over her head, but she couldn't escape the memory of how natural it had felt to be in that warm, chaotic kitchen. How for just a moment, she'd forgotten about quarterly reports and board meetings and her carefully constructed image. She thought of her own pristine kitchen, unused and unloved, and something that felt suspiciously like longing settled in her chest. The unfamiliar comfort she'd felt in the diner had shaken her more than any hostile takeover ever had, because comfort meant vulnerability. And vulnerability was dangerous, wasn't it? The morning light filtered through the tall windows of Charlotte's penthouse office, casting long shadows across the polished hardwood floors. Ethan sat across from her at her glass desk, a notebook open between them. His worn leather jacket looked out of place against the sleek modern furniture, but his gentle presence somehow made the sterile room feel warmer. "So," Charlotte said, tapping her pen against her notepad, "we need a convincing story of how we met. Something memorable, but not too dramatic." Ethan leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "Well, we did meet at the diner during that storm. That's pretty memorable, isn't it?" "Yes, but we can't mention the arrangement." Charlotte's voice was clipped, professional. "We need something romantic. How about this?" Ethan's eyes sparkled with sudden inspiration. "It was a stormy night, and you were seeking shelter from the rain. You came into my diner, soaked to the bone, looking like a dream in your fancy suit." Charlotte rolled her eyes, but couldn't help the small smile tugging at her lips. "A dream? Really? Hey, I'm trying to be romantic here," Ethan chuckled. "So there you were, this sophisticated city woman who lost her way in our little town. I offered you a cup of my special blend coffee and my grandmother's apple pie. Is everything in your stories food-related?" Charlotte interrupted, but her tone was playful. "Food brings people together," Ethan shrugged. "It's how I show people I care." Something in his simple honesty made Charlotte pause. She watched as he continued weaving their fictional first meeting, his hands moving expressively as he spoke. There was something captivating about the way he told stories. Nothing fancy or pretentious, just genuine warmth that made you want to lean in closer. "And then," he continued, "you took one bite of that pie and declared it the best thing you'd ever tasted. We talked for hours, lost track of time. The storm passed, but you didn't want to leave." Charlotte found herself drawn into his narrative, almost believing it herself. "That's actually quite good," she admitted. "I do know a thing or two about romance," Ethan said with a wink. "Even if I am just a small-town diner owner." The sound of small feet padding across the floor interrupted their session. Lily burst into the office, her backpack bouncing, fresh from the morning at school that Charlotte's driver had picked her up from. "Daddy, Charlotte, look what I made in art class today." She waved a piece of paper excitedly. Ethan's face softened at the sight of his daughter. "What have you got there, sweetheart?" Lily proudly held up her drawing. It was done in bright crayon colors, 3 figures standing in front of what appeared to be the diner. One tall figure wore a tie, Ethan. Another had long dark hair and high heels, Charlotte. And between them stood a smaller figure with pigtails, Lily. "It's us," Lily beamed. "Miss Johnson said to draw our family, so I drew all of us." Ethan's face flushed red. "Lily, honey, that's not," he began gently, but Charlotte was staring at the drawing, something shifting behind her carefully composed expression. In Lily's artwork, they were all holding hands. The sun was yellow and happy in the corner, and hearts floated around them. It was exactly the kind of picture any child would draw of their family. Simple, loving, perfect. "Do you like it, Charlotte?" Lily asked, suddenly shy. Charlotte swallowed hard. "It's beautiful, Lily," she said softly. "You're quite the artist." "You can keep it if you want," Lily offered, holding out the drawing. "I can make another one." Ethan started to protest. "Lily, I'm sure Charlotte doesn't want it." "I'd love to keep it," Charlotte interrupted, surprising herself as much as Ethan. She took the picture carefully, as if it were made of glass instead of construction paper. Lily beamed and threw her arms around Charlotte in a quick hug before skipping off to the adjacent room where her coloring books were set up. Charlotte sat frozen, the warmth of the child's embrace lingering. Ethan cleared his throat. "I'm sorry about that. Kids, they get carried away with their imagination." "It's fine," Charlotte said quickly, perhaps too quickly. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. "We should probably wrap this up. I have a meeting in 30 minutes. Later that evening, after Ethan and Lily had gone home, Charlotte sat alone in her office. The city lights twinkled outside her window, but she wasn't looking at them. Instead, her eyes were fixed on Lily's drawing, still lying on her desk. She should throw it away. It wasn't real. None of this was real. The drawing represented a fantasy, a lie they were telling for business purposes. Charlotte Hayes didn't keep sentimental things, especially not children's artwork, yet her hands betrayed her heart. She opened her desk drawer, the one where she kept her most important documents, and carefully placed the drawing inside. She closed the drawer quietly, as if making too much noise might break whatever spell had compelled her to keep it. For a moment, she rested her hand on the closed drawer, feeling strangely protective of the colorful piece of paper now hidden inside. Then, straightening her shoulders, she turned back to her computer screen, determined to focus on work and not think about the way Lily's eyes had lit up when she'd accepted the drawing, or how natural it had felt to hear Ethan spinning tales of romance, or how, for just a moment, she'd allowed herself to imagine it was all real. The Grand Plaza Hotel's ballroom sparkled like a crystal palace. Hundreds of chandeliers cast golden light across marble floors, while Seattle's elite mingled in designer evening wear. Ethan Carter tugged at his bow tie, feeling like a fish out of water in his rented tuxedo. "Stop fidgeting," Charlotte whispered, her hand light on his arm. She looked stunning in an emerald silk gown that made her eyes shine. "You look perfect." "Perfect isn't the word I'd use," Ethan muttered, watching a waiter glide past with champagne flutes balanced on a silver tray. "I feel like everyone can tell I don't belong here." Charlotte squeezed his arm. "Nonsense, you clean up quite nicely, Mr. Carter." Before Ethan could respond, a group of board members approached. He recognized Richard Thompson, the most vocal skeptic of Charlotte's leadership, leading the pack. "Charlotte, darling." A woman in her 60s air kissed Charlotte's cheeks. "You must introduce us properly to this charming man of yours." Charlotte's professional smile never wavered. "Of course. Everyone, this is Ethan Carter. Ethan, meet the board." Ethan shook hands, remembering the names Charlotte had drilled into him. His palms were sweating, but he managed a warm smile. "It's wonderful to meet you all. Charlotte's told me so much about your work with the company." "And what do you do, Mr. Carter?" Richard Thompson asked, his tone carefully neutral. "I own a diner in Willow Creek," Ethan said simply. He saw a few raised eyebrows but continued with quiet pride. "Been in the family for 3 generations. There's something special about feeding people, bringing them together over a good meal." To his surprise, several board members nodded appreciatively. The woman who'd greeted them first, Margaret, he remembered, actually clapped her hands. "How refreshing. Such honest work. And your little girl, Charlotte, mentioned she's absolutely adorable." Ethan's face softened at the mention of Lily. "She's the light of my life. Actually, she drew Charlotte a picture just yesterday." He pulled out his wallet, where he'd tucked Lily's latest artwork. The board members gathered around, cooing over the crayon family portrait. Charlotte watched, something shifting in her expression. Ethan caught her eye and saw a flash of something. Warmth? Longing? But before he could analyze it, the orchestra struck up a waltz. "Dance with me," Charlotte said suddenly, pulling him away from the group. Ethan followed her lead onto the dance floor, grateful for the dancing lessons she'd insisted on last week. "You're doing wonderfully," she murmured as they moved together. "They're completely charmed." "I'm just being myself," Ethan said, carefully guiding her through a turn. "Though I have to admit, this is a bit fancier than the kitchen dancing I do with Lily." Charlotte's laugh was genuine, musical. "I can just picture you two, spinning around between the tables. Usually with wooden spoons as microphones." Ethan grinned. "You should join us sometime." Something vulnerable flickered across Charlotte's face. The hand on his shoulder tightened slightly. "Ethan," he held his breath, waiting for the usual reminder that this was just business. But instead, Charlotte's eyes dropped to his lips. Before he could process what was happening, she leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't their first kiss. They'd shared careful, staged ones for photos. But this was different. This kiss was soft, uncertain, real. Charlotte's lips trembled against his, and her hand curled into the fabric of his jacket. For a moment, the glittering ballroom faded away, and it was just them, swaying to the music. When they parted, Charlotte's cheeks were flushed. She looked as startled as Ethan felt, as if she couldn't quite believe what she'd done. The orchestra finished their song, and applause broke out around them. Excuse me, Charlotte said quickly. I need some air. She hurried toward the terrace doors. Ethan watched her go, his heart pounding. That kiss hadn't been for show. There was no one filming, no reporters nearby. It had been pure impulse, pure feeling. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Charlotte returned after a few minutes, composed once more, but something had changed. Her smile seemed softer, her laughter more genuine. When she introduced Ethan to more guests, her hand stayed linked with his. Finally, as the gala wound down, they made their way to the valet stand. Ethan's old truck looked comically out of place among the luxury cars, but Charlotte didn't hesitate to let him help her in. As they drove through the quiet streets, Ethan couldn't help stealing glances at her. The city lights played across her face, and she seemed lost in thought, one hand absently touching her lips. The carefully constructed walls she usually maintained seemed to have hairline cracks, showing glimpses of the woman beneath. "You're staring," she said softly, not looking at him. "Sorry," Ethan replied, though he wasn't, really. "You look beautiful tonight." Charlotte turned to face him then, and for once, she didn't counter his compliment with a businesslike response. Instead, she simply watched him drive, her expression thoughtful and perhaps a little afraid. The rest of the drive passed in comfortable silence, the kind that felt full of possibility. As they approached Charlotte's building, Ethan wondered if tonight had changed everything or nothing at all. Morning sunlight streamed through the diner's windows as Ethan wiped down the counter for the third time, his movements distracted and dreamy. The memory of last night's kiss at the gala played over and over in his mind like a favorite movie scene. He could still feel the softness of Charlotte's lips, the way she had leaned into him with unexpected tenderness. "Dad, you already cleaned that spot," Lily said from her usual corner booth, giggling at her father's absent-mindedness. She was coloring another picture, probably another family scene to add to her growing collection. "Just making sure it's extra clean, sweetie," Ethan replied, finally setting down the cloth. His phone buzzed with a message, and his heart skipped, but it was just his produce supplier confirming tomorrow's delivery. The bell above the door chimed, and Charlotte walked in. Ethan's smile faltered as he noticed her rigid posture, her face a careful mask of professionalism. She wore a sleek business suit, every hair perfectly in place, as if trying to erase any trace of the woman who had kissed him so passionately the night before. "Good morning," she said crisply, barely meeting his eyes. "I need to discuss the schedule for next week's board meeting. Charlotte, about last night." Ethan started softly. "Let's keep things focused on business," she cut him off, pulling out her tablet. Her fingers tapped rapidly on the screen, creating a wall between them. "The quarterly review is crucial, and we need to present a united front." Lily bounced over, holding up her latest drawing. "Look what I made, Charlotte!" For a moment, Charlotte's mask cracked as she glanced at the colorful picture. Her expression softened, but she quickly straightened up, clearing her throat. "That's lovely, Lily, but I'm afraid I'm here for a business meeting with your father." Lily's face fell, and she retreated to her booth. Ethan felt a familiar ache in his chest, watching his daughter's shoulders slump. Across town in the gleaming Hayes Corporation building, Richard Dalton sat in his corner office, a predatory smile playing on his lips. He scrolled through financial records on his computer screen, pausing occasionally to jot notes in an expensive leather-bound notebook. "Miss Hayes's perfect small-town romance," he muttered, examining a series of recent transactions from Charlotte's personal accounts. "A bit too perfect, if you ask me." His secretary knocked and entered with a stack of papers. "The background check you requested on Ethan Carter, sir." Richard's eyes gleamed as he flipped through the pages. "Financial troubles, mortgage payments behind, medical bills. How interesting." He stopped at a bank statement showing a large deposit made shortly before Ethan and Charlotte's relationship became public. "Very interesting indeed." Back at the diner, Charlotte was all business, reviewing talking points while barely touching her coffee. Ethan noticed her hands trembling slightly as she held her cup, betraying the effort it took to maintain her cold facade. "The board needs to see stability," she said, her voice clipped. "Last night's gala was successful, but we can't let emotions compromise our arrangement." "Is that what you're afraid of?" Ethan asked quietly. "Emotions?" Charlotte's mask slipped for just a second, revealing a flash of vulnerability before she schooled her features back into neutrality. "I'm not afraid of anything, Mr. Carter. I'm simply maintaining professional boundaries." The formal use of his name stung worse than a slap. Ethan watched her gather her things, her movements precise and controlled, so different from the woman who had melted into his arms the night before. In his office, Richard made several calls, speaking in hushed tones to contacts at various banks and financial institutions. Each conversation added another piece to the puzzle he was assembling. "And you're certain about these transfers?" he asked one source, scribbling furiously. "Perfect timing, wouldn't you say? Right before their first public appearance?" He hung up and leaned back in his leather chair, satisfaction written across his features. A quick search through social media revealed no trace of Ethan and Charlotte's relationship before their sudden public debut. No casual mentions, no candid photos, nothing to suggest a natural progression of romance. "Oh, Charlotte," he chuckled darkly, "you finally made a mistake." The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the diner's windows as Charlotte prepared to leave. She had spent the entire meeting avoiding any personal conversation, treating Ethan like a business associate rather than someone who had held her close just hours ago. "The car will pick you up at 7 on Tuesday," she said, standing. "Please wear the blue suit we bought last week." "Charlotte?" Ethan tried one more time. "We need to talk about what happened." "Nothing happened," she replied sharply, then softened slightly at his hurt expression. "Nothing that wasn't part of our agreement." She glanced at Lily, who was watching them with sad eyes, then quickly looked away. Richard sat in his office late into the evening, methodically building his case. Bank records, timing of public appearances, background checks, all pointing to one conclusion. He pulled out his phone and snapped photos of key documents, already planning how best to use this information. "The board will be very interested to learn about their CEO's creative solution to their concerns," he murmured, a satisfied smirk spreading across his face. He tucked the evidence into his briefcase, already imagining the chaos this revelation would cause. Charlotte Hayes' perfect romance was about to crumble, and Richard Dalton would be there to pick up the pieces. The Grand Plaza Hotel's ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and polished marble floors. Shareholders in expensive suits mingled over champagne, their quiet conversations filling the air with a steady hum. Ethan tugged at his borrowed tie, feeling out of place among the sea of designer clothing and practiced smiles. Charlotte stood nearby, commanding attention in her crimson dress as she chatted with board members. Her laugh carried across the room, confident and controlled. Lily sat at a corner table, contentedly drawing with the colored pencils Ethan had brought to keep her occupied. Richard Dalton moved through the crowd like a shark, his perfectly tailored suit as sharp as his calculating smile. He paused to whisper to small groups, leaving ripples of shocked expressions in his wake. Soon, the quiet murmurs grew louder, and heads began turning toward Ethan and Charlotte. "Did you hear? Paid actor. Contract relationship. $50,000. The whispers grew into a wave that crashed against Ethan's ears. His chest tightened as he watched realization spread across faces, followed by judgment and disdain. Some people weren't even trying to hide their stares anymore. Charlotte's voice faltered mid-sentence as she noticed the shift in the room. Her eyes met Richard's smug expression across the crowd, and color drained from her face. Richard raised his glass in mock salute, then turned to address the growing audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard's voice cut through the murmurs, "I believe we've all been treated to quite a performance these past weeks." He pulled out a folder. "I have here some very interesting documentation about Miss Hayes' latest investment." Charlotte's heels clicked against the marble as she strode toward Richard, but he continued speaking. "A contract, signed and dated, outlining payment for services rendered. Seems our beloved CEO needed to manufacture a relationship to appease the board." The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Ethan's stomach dropped as he saw phones appear, recording the unfolding drama. He glanced at Lily, who had stopped drawing and was watching with worried eyes. "Charlotte?" One of the older board members stepped forward. "Is this true?" All eyes turned to Charlotte. Ethan could see the panic behind her composed expression, the slight tremor in her hands as she gripped her champagne glass. In that moment, he recognized the look of someone about to choose survival over everything else. Charlotte's voice rang out, clear and cold. Of course it was a business arrangement. She gave a practiced laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Did anyone really think I would seriously be involved with a small-town diner owner?" The words hit Ethan like physical blows. He watched as Charlotte straightened her spine, donning her CEO armor completely. "It was a calculated decision to address concerns about my personal life affecting company stability," she continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Mr. Carter provided a service, nothing more. The arrangement has served its purpose and is now concluded." The crowd murmured with fresh gossip, some people nodding and understanding at this ruthless business logic. Richard's smile widened as he watched Charlotte slice through any pretense of genuine connection. Ethan stood frozen, the humiliation burning through him. Every shared laugh, every soft moment, every time he'd thought he'd seen behind her walls, all of it crumbled under the weight of her dismissal. But worse than his own pain was seeing Lily's face crumple in confusion and hurt. But you helped me with my homework." Lily's small voice somehow carried through the crowd. "You said you liked my drawings." Charlotte's mask slipped for just a fraction of a second as she looked at Lily. Something like regret flickered in her eyes before the steel returned. "Come on, sweetheart," Ethan said quietly, reaching for his daughter's hand. He gathered her drawings with his other hand, careful not to crumple them even as his own hand shook. "We're leaving, Daddy?" Lily's voice wavered as she clutched his hand. "It's okay," he whispered, though nothing felt okay. The crowd parted as they walked toward the exit, their stares burning into his back. Some faces showed pity, others contempt. A few even showed understanding, as if Charlotte's cruel dismissal made perfect business sense. Just before reaching the door, Ethan paused. He turned back, not to Charlotte, but to the room at large. "The food's always free at Carter's Diner for anyone who needs a meal," he said simply. "That's not business. That's just being human." Then he walked out with Lily, leaving behind the glitter and pretense of a world that had never really been theirs. The heavy door closed behind them with a quiet click that somehow felt more final than any slam could have. The neon open sign flickered off with a soft buzz, casting shadows across Carter's Diner. Rain tapped against the windows, matching the quiet tears rolling down Lily's cheeks as she sat in their usual booth. Her small fingers traced patterns on the worn tabletop, her math homework forgotten beside her. "Daddy?" Her voice quivered. "Why doesn't Charlotte want us anymore?" Ethan's heart shattered at the question. He set down the rag he'd been using to wipe tables and slid into the booth next to his daughter. The vinyl seat creaked beneath him, a sound that used to feel comforting but now seemed hollow. Sometimes, he struggled to find words that wouldn't hurt more. "Sometimes grown-ups make choices that don't make sense, honey." Lily's lower lip trembled. "But she liked my drawings. She helped me with my homework. She even knew how to use my inhaler just right." Her small hands clutched her favorite colored pencil, the purple one Charlotte had given her. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, sweetheart." Ethan pulled her close, feeling her tears dampen his shirt. "You didn't do anything wrong. None of this is your fault." Through the window, he watched another potential customer read the close sign and walk away. The diner's early closure would cost them, but he couldn't face anyone right now, not after what happened at the hotel. The memory of Charlotte's words still stung. Just a business arrangement. The way she'd said it, so cold and dismissive in front of all those people, the pitying looks, the whispers. Lily's confused face as he'd rushed her out of there. Bills littered the counter near the register, medical expenses for Lily's last asthma attack, utility warnings, the bank's latest notice. Without Charlotte's promised money, they were drowning again. Worse than before, because now they knew what it felt like to hope. "Can we call her?" Lily asked, her voice small. "Maybe if I tell her I'm sorry." "Baby, you have nothing to be sorry for." Ethan smoothed her hair, remembering how Charlotte used to do the same thing. "Sometimes people just can't give us what we need." The diner felt emptier than ever. No chattering customers, no clinking plates, no coffee brewing, just silence and shadows. Even Mary, his longtime waitress, had left early, sensing they needed space. Lily pulled out her sketchbook, the nice one Charlotte had bought her, and flipped through pages of drawings. Happy scenes of the three of them, at the park, in the diner, reading stories. Each picture was a knife to Ethan's heart. "My chest feels funny," Lily whispered, and for a terrifying moment, Ethan thought it was another asthma attack, but she touched her heart, not her lungs. Like something's missing. He knew exactly what she meant. The space Charlotte had carved out in their lives gaped like an open wound. He'd been foolish to let her in, to believe that someone like her could want their simple life, their modest love. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence. Usually by this time, they'd be planning tomorrow's specials, counting the day's earnings, looking forward to Charlotte's evening visit. Now, the routine felt pointless. "Time for bed, sweetheart," Ethan said gently, noting how late it had gotten. "Go brush your teeth, okay?" Lily nodded, gathering her things slowly, as if hoping Charlotte might suddenly appear. She paused at the stairs leading to their apartment above the diner. "Daddy? Will it always hurt like this?" Ethan swallowed hard. "No, baby. It'll get better. I promise. After tucking Lily in, he returned to the dark diner. The rain had picked up, drumming against the roof. He moved mechanically through the closing tasks, counting the meager register, wiping down surfaces, checking the kitchen. On the bulletin board behind the counter, a photo caught his eye. It was from just last week, Lily sitting on Charlotte's lap at their booth, both laughing as they shared a slice of apple pie. Charlotte's usual corporate mask was nowhere to be seen, replaced by genuine joy, the kind of joy he'd foolishly thought was real. Ethan sank into a chair, the photo trembling in his hands. The diner had never felt so empty, so cold. Everything reminded him of her, the coffee cup she always used, the corner booth she preferred, the way she'd loosened her tie after a long day, and really smiled, just for them. The bills seemed to mock him from the counter. Without Charlotte's money, he'd have to figure something out fast. The bank wouldn't wait much longer. Lily's medications couldn't wait at all. But the financial crisis wasn't what broke him. It was the memory of Charlotte's face, when Lily had first called her mommy by accident. That flash of tenderness before her walls slammed back up. The way she taught Lily to fold paper cranes during slow afternoons. The quiet moments when she'd let her guard down, just enough to feel like family. All lies. All part of the arrangement. The photo blurred as tears filled his eyes. In the image, they looked like a real family. The kind of family Lily deserved. The kind he dared to dream they could be. But dreams didn't pay bills. Dreams didn't heal broken hearts. Outside, the last streetlight flickered, casting strange shadows through the rain-streaked windows. The diner, his father's legacy, his daughter's future, felt more like a cage than a home. Everything he'd worked for, everything he'd hoped for, seemed to be slipping through his fingers. Lily's cough echoed from upstairs, a reminder that he couldn't afford to wallow in self-pity. Tomorrow, he'd have to be strong again. Tomorrow, he'd have to figure out how to save the diner, how to pay for Lily's medicine, how to mend his daughter's broken heart. But tonight, in the empty diner, surrounded by memories of what could have been, Ethan Carter let himself break. The photo of happier times clutched in his trembling hands. He sat alone in the darkness as Act 2 drew to its bitter close. Charlotte Hayes sat alone in her corner office, surrounded by the glittering lights of the city skyline. The wall of windows behind her desk reflected her image, perfectly styled hair, designer suit, not a wrinkle in sight. But her usual mask of confidence had cracked. On her pristine desk, Lily's crayon drawing lay under the warm glow of her desk lamp. 3 stick figures held hands, one tall with brown hair, one with yellow hair in a business suit, and a small figure with pigtails. Above them, written in wobbly letters, "My family." Charlotte's fingertips traced the childish lines. The paper had become worn at the edges from how many times she'd pulled it out these past few days. "Daddy says you make the best faces when you try not to smile," Lily had told her while drawing it. The memory made her throat tight. Her phone buzzed. Another message from the board about damage control. She ignored it. Instead, she picked up the photo frame she'd hidden in her drawer after the scandal broke. It showed her, Ethan, and Lily at the diner. Lily sat between them, chocolate ice cream smeared across her grin. Ethan's eyes crinkled at the corners as he laughed at something Charlotte had said. And Charlotte herself, she barely recognized that woman, with her guard down, genuine joy softening her features. Just a business arrangement, she'd called them. The words echoed in her mind, bitter as coffee grounds. She remembered Ethan's face when she'd said it, the way his warm brown eyes had turned dull with hurt. Worse was Lily's confusion, her small voice asking, "Don't you like us anymore?" Charlotte stood abruptly, walking to the window. The city stretched below, a maze of lights and shadows. She'd spent 15 years climbing to this office, making herself untouchable. No relationships, no attachments, no weaknesses. Just like her father had taught her, success requires sacrifice, Charlotte. You can't afford to be soft. But in the reflection, she saw herself, really saw herself, alone at midnight in an empty building, surrounded by awards and accolades that suddenly felt hollow. She remembered moments that had slipped past her careful defenses. Ethan teaching her how to flip pancakes in the diner kitchen. Flour dusting his forearms. Lily falling asleep against her shoulder during movie night, trusting and warm. The way Ethan looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, like she was something precious rather than powerful. Her hands trembled as she picked up her phone, scrolling through recent photos. There were dozens from their month together. Lily showing off her missing tooth. Ethan pretending to be a monster in the park while Lily squealed with delight. Charlotte herself, caught mid-laugh during a pillow fight. A family. They'd given her a family, asked nothing in return except her heart, and she'd thrown it away to protect her image. "I was wrong," she whispered to the empty office. The words felt foreign on her tongue. Charlotte Hayes was never wrong. Charlotte Hayes never admitted weakness. Charlotte Hayes never needed anyone, but she did need them. The realization hit her like a physical blow, forcing her to sit back down. She needed Ethan's quiet strength, his ability to make everyone feel valued just by listening. She needed Lily's boundless joy, her way of seeing magic in ordinary moments. She needed their love, messy, complicated, and real. Charlotte opened her laptop, fingers flying across the keys. First, an email to her board of directors. Then, a series of instructions to her lawyer. Finally, a resignation letter she'd been drafting and deleting for days. Her hands shook as she pressed send, but her heart felt lighter than it had in years. The weight of pretense, of perfect control, fell away. For the first time since she was a little girl, Charlotte Hayes was choosing love over success. She pulled out a small overnight bag from under her desk. She'd packed it that morning, though she hadn't admitted to herself why. Into it went Lily's drawing and the family photo. Her heels clicked against the marble floor as she walked to the elevator. Leaving behind the office she'd sacrificed everything to obtain. In the parking garage, she paused by her expensive car, then turned toward the older sedan she kept as a backup. It felt right, somehow, to drive to Willow Creek in something less showy. The clock on the dashboard read 12:47 a.m. as she pulled out onto the quiet street. "I'm coming," she whispered, though they couldn't hear her. "Please let me make this right." The morning sun cast long shadows through the windows of Carter's Diner as Charlotte pulled into the nearly empty parking lot. Her usual confident stride faltered as she approached the entrance, her heels clicking against the worn concrete. Through the glass, she could see Ethan wiping down tables, his shoulders tense and movements mechanical. The bell above the door chimed as she entered. Ethan's back stiffened, but he didn't turn around. The familiar scent of coffee and fresh baked bread filled the air, but today it felt heavy with unspoken words. "Ethan," Charlotte said softly, her voice lacking its usual authority, "please look at me." He continued wiping the same spot on the table, his knuckles white around the cloth. "We're closed," he said, his voice flat. "I know." Charlotte took a few steps closer, her designer heels out of place on the weathered linoleum floor. "I needed to see you, to explain." "There's nothing to explain." Ethan finally straightened up but kept his eyes fixed on the table. "You made everything perfectly clear at the shareholders' meeting." Charlotte's perfectly manicured hands twisted together, a nervous gesture she'd trained herself out of years ago. "What I said that day. I was wrong. I panicked." "Panicked?" Now Ethan did turn, his eyes meeting hers with a mix of hurt and anger that made her flinch. "You didn't just panic, Charlotte. You threw us away like we meant nothing. Do you know what Lily asked me that night?" Charlotte's throat tightened. "Ethan," she asked why you didn't want to be her mommy anymore. His voice cracked slightly. "How do I explain to an 8-year-old that she was just part of a business deal?" The words hit Charlotte like physical blows. She sank into one of the vinyl booths, her usual poise deserting her. "I never meant to hurt Lily. Or you. But you did." Ethan tossed the cleaning cloth onto the counter with more force than necessary. "You walked into our lives with your contract and your money, and we started believing in something real. That was my mistake." "It wasn't just your mistake," Charlotte whispered. "I started believing too. That's what scared me." Ethan let out a bitter laugh. The great Charlotte Hayes? Scared? Of what? A small-town diner owner and his daughter? Yes. The simple admission hung in the air between them. Of how easy it was to fall into this life. Of how right it felt. "So you destroyed it instead?" Ethan moved behind the counter, creating a barrier between them. "Because that's what successful business people do, right? Cut their losses before they get hurt?" Charlotte stood up, taking a step toward the counter. "I want to help make this right. The diner, Lily's medical bills." "Stop." Ethan's voice was sharp. "We're not another project for you to fix. You can't just throw money at this and make it better. That's not what Isn't it?" Ethan finally met her eyes fully, and the pain she saw there made her breath catch. "You come in here in your $1,000 suit, thinking you can buy back what you broke? We're real people, Charlotte, with real feelings. This isn't some corporate takeover where you can calculate the risks and returns." Tears threatened to spill from Charlotte's eyes, but she blinked them back. "I know that now. I know this isn't business anymore. It never really was. Not after that first night." You've got a funny way of showing it. Charlotte squared her shoulders, drawing on years of boardroom battles for strength. I'll prove it to you, she said firmly. This isn't business anymore. I care about you and Lily more than any deal or company. Words, Ethan said quietly. Just more words. Charlotte reached for the door handle, pausing before she pulled it open. Watch me, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. I'll show you the truth. The bell chimed again as she left. Ethan moved to the window, watching as she climbed into her sleek car. The vehicle's taillights grew smaller and smaller until they disappeared around the corner. His hand pressed against the cool glass, caught between the urge to call her back and the fear of being hurt again. The morning sun continued to climb, casting new shadows across the diner floor. But Ethan remained at the window long after Charlotte's car had vanished from sight. The diner felt emptier than usual, filled with the ghosts of laughter and possibilities that had seemed so real just days ago. Ethan finally turned away from the window, his heart a battlefield between hope and fear, knowing that whatever happened next would change everything. Again, the autumn wind whipped through the schoolyard as children played during recess. Inside, Lily sat at her desk, working on a math problem. Her small hand gripped her pencil tighter as she felt the familiar tightness in her chest beginning to build. She tried to take slow breaths like her dad had taught her, but the wheezing had already started. Mrs. Parker, Lily called out weakly, raising her hand. Her teacher turned from the whiteboard, the smile on her face quickly fading as she saw Lily's pale complexion. The inhaler wasn't helping. Within minutes, the school nurse had called 911, and then Ethan. He abandoned the lunch rush at the diner without a second thought, leaving his startled cook in charge. His truck screeched into the school parking lot just as the ambulance arrived. Baby, I'm here, Ethan said, rushing to Lily's side. She sat in the nurse's office, her breathing labored and shallow, her small fingers clutched at her chest, tears streaming down her face. The sight of his daughter struggling for air sent ice through his veins. The paramedics worked quickly, loading Lily onto a stretcher. Ethan held her hand the entire ride to the hospital, whispering reassurances, even as his own heart thundered with fear. The ambulance siren wailed above them, cutting through traffic. Just keep breathing, sweetheart. Nice and slow, he coached, trying to keep his voice steady. But Lily's lips had taken on a bluish tinge that terrified him. They burst through the emergency room doors, medical staff swarming around them. As they wheeled Lily down the stark white hallway, a familiar voice cut through the chaos. I'm here. What happened? Charlotte Hayes stood at the nurse's station, her usual polished appearance slightly disheveled. Her face was drawn with concern as she rushed toward them. Ethan stared in disbelief. Charlotte? How did you? The school called me, she explained quickly, keeping pace with the stretcher. I've been funding their health program. I'm listed as an emergency contact. Before Ethan could process this revelation, they reached the treatment room. The medical team worked swiftly, hooking Lily up to monitors and starting breathing treatments. Ethan and Charlotte were ushered to the side, watching helplessly as doctors and nurses surrounded the little girl. Hours crawled by in the sterile hospital room. The immediate crisis passed, but Lily remained on oxygen, her small form dwarfed by the hospital bed. Ethan paced, his shirt wrinkled, hair mussed from running his hands through it countless times. Charlotte never left. She made calls to reschedule meetings, sent emails from her phone, and ordered food that Ethan barely touched. As evening settled in, she quietly arranged for Lily's favorite stuffed animal to be brought from home. You didn't have to stay, Ethan said softly, watching Charlotte adjust Lily's blanket for the 10th time. Yes, I did. Her voice was firm but gentle. She looked up at him, her usual corporate mask completely gone. I've been having the school nurse monitor her breathing daily, making sure she always had access to emergency care. I thought I could protect her from a distance. Ethan sank into a chair, absorbing this information. All this time, Charlotte nodded, her fingers absently smoothing Lily's hair. I couldn't just walk away from her, Ethan, from either of you, even if I was too scared to admit it. Night fell outside the hospital windows. The beeping of monitors created a steady rhythm in the quiet room. Nurses came and went, checking vitals and adjusting medications. Through it all, Charlotte remained, her designer suit growing more wrinkled by the hour. Around midnight, Lily stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Charlotte? She whispered hoarsely. I'm right here, sweetheart. Charlotte moved closer, taking Lily's small hand in hers. Will you stay? As long as you want me to, Charlotte promised, her voice thick with emotion. Lily drifted back to sleep, her breathing finally even and peaceful. Ethan watched as Charlotte maintained her vigil, refusing to let go of Lily's hand even as exhaustion clearly pulled at her. Eventually, Charlotte's head began to nod, her usually perfect posture slumping in the uncomfortable hospital chair. Still, she didn't release Lily's hand. Her other arm curled protectively around the bed rail, as if she could ward off any threat to the sleeping child. Ethan stood in the doorway, returning from his coffee run, and paused. The sight before him caught his breath. Charlotte Hayes, the formidable CEO, had fallen asleep beside his daughter's hospital bed. Her makeup was smudged, her hair falling from its usual pristine style. In sleep, all her carefully constructed walls had crumbled away, leaving only raw devotion evident in the way she held Lily's hand even in slumber. The paper coffee cups in his hands cooled, forgotten, as he watched the two most important people in his world sleep peacefully in the quiet hospital room. Morning sunlight crept through the hospital room's thin curtains, casting a soft glow across Lily's peaceful sleeping form. Charlotte's neck ached from the awkward position in the vinyl chair, her hands still intertwined with Lily's smaller one. As consciousness slowly returned, she became aware of another presence in the room. Ethan stood by the window, his broad shoulders outlined against the growing dawn. Dark circles under his eyes revealed his sleepless night, but his gaze held steady as it met hers. The silence between them felt heavy with unspoken words. Charlotte straightened in her chair, wincing at her stiff muscles, but didn't let go of Lily's hand. Her usually perfect appearance was disheveled, her designer blouse wrinkled, her hair falling loose from its neat bun. For once, she didn't care how she looked. "You stayed," Ethan said quietly, his voice rough with exhaustion. "Of course I stayed." Charlotte's whisper matched his, careful not to wake Lily. "I couldn't leave her. Not again." The steady beeping of the heart monitor filled the pause between them. Charlotte looked down at Lily's peaceful face, then back at Ethan. Her carefully constructed walls began to crumble. "I was so scared," she admitted, her voice trembling. "When the school called about her attack, I couldn't breathe." She swallowed hard. "Is this how you feel every time?" Ethan moved closer, settling into the chair on Lily's other side. "Every single time." Charlotte's free hand clenched in her lap. "I don't deserve to feel this way, to care this much, not after what I did to you both." "Charlotte, no, please." She held up her hand, tears gathering in her eyes. "I need to say this." The morning light strengthened, warming the sterile room. A nurse passed by in the hallway, her shoes squeaking against the linoleum floor. "All my life, I've been taught that love is weakness," Charlotte began, her voice barely above a whisper. "My father built his empire by being ruthless. My mother measured success in stock prices and merger deals." She gave a bitter laugh. "The day I made CEO, they sent congratulation cards through their assistants." Ethan remained silent, but his eyes never left her face. "Then I met you and Lily." Charlotte's thumb stroked Lily's small hand. "You showed me what real strength looks like. It's not in board meetings or profit margins. It's in making pancakes before dawn. It's in checking homework and kissing scraped knees. It's in sacrificing everything for someone else's happiness." Tears spilled down her cheeks now, but she made no move to wipe them away. "When Richard threatened to expose our arrangement, I panicked. I did exactly what I'd been trained to do: protect myself, cut my losses, maintain control." Her voice cracked. "But I lost the only thing that ever really mattered." Lily stirred slightly in her sleep, and both adults held their breath until she settled again. "I was wrong," Charlotte continued, her professional mask completely gone. "So terribly wrong. Love isn't weakness. It's the strongest thing I've ever known. And I've been such a coward, running from it." She finally looked directly at Ethan, her eyes red but determined. "You and Lily, you're my family. My real family. Not because of any contract or business deal, but because you showed me what home feels like, what belonging feels like." She took a shaky breath. "If you'll let me, I want to be part of that, really part of it. No pretending, no conditions." The morning sun now filled the room completely, highlighting the tears on Charlotte's face and the conflicting emotions in Ethan's expression. He looked down at his sleeping daughter, then back at the woman who had turned their world upside down. Slowly, carefully, Ethan reached across Lily's hospital bed. His calloused hand found Charlotte's trembling one and held it. He didn't speak, but his touch said everything his cautious heart wasn't ready to voice. The steady beeping of the heart monitor continued its rhythm as three hands joined across the white hospital sheets, while outside the window, A new day dawned over Willow Creek. The hospital discharge papers rustled in Ethan's hands as he stood by Lily's bed, watching a nurse remove the IV line. Lily's color had returned, her breathing steady and strong. Charlotte hovered nearby, her designer blazer wrinkled from sleeping in the chair, but her eyes were bright with concern. "Ready to go home, sweetheart?" Ethan asked, smoothing Lily's tangled hair. "Can Charlotte come with us?" Lily's voice was small but hopeful, her eyes darting between the two adults. Before Ethan could respond, Charlotte stepped forward. "Actually, I thought maybe I could drive you both. My car's right outside." She fiddled with her car keys, uncertain. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. After last night, something had shifted between them. The drive back to Willow Creek was quiet, punctuated only by Lily's occasional humming from the back seat. Charlotte drove carefully, stealing glances at Ethan in the passenger seat. When they pulled up to the diner, she surprised them both by turning off the engine. "I'd like to help today," she said softly. "If that's okay." Inside the diner, regular customers did double takes at the sight of Charlotte Hayes, corporate CEO and recent subject of local gossip, tying on a spare apron over her expensive clothes. She rolled up her sleeves and stepped behind the counter, determination written across her face. "Just tell me what to do," she said to Ethan. Throughout the afternoon, Charlotte threw herself into diner work with the same intensity she usually reserved for board meetings. She learned to operate the ancient coffee maker, served slices of apple pie, and didn't flinch when her hands disappeared into soapy dishwater. Her corporate polish melted away with each passing hour. Mrs. Jenkins, a retired schoolteacher and daily customer, watched Charlotte wipe down tables with careful attention. "Well, she muttered to her friend. "Looks like there's a real person under all that fancy after all." Lily sat at her usual homework spot, coloring and occasionally giggling at Charlotte's fumbling attempts to balance plates. The sound made Charlotte's heart swell. Sarah, the longtime waitress who had initially eyed Charlotte with suspicion, found herself warming to the CEO's earnest efforts. When Charlotte accidentally dropped a stack of menus, Sarah helped her gather them up. "You're not half bad at this," Sarah admitted. For a beginner, Charlotte's genuine smile and response surprised them both. As the afternoon wore on, Ethan caught himself watching Charlotte more and more. The way she bit her lip in concentration while refilling sugar dispensers. How she'd unconsciously touch Lily's shoulder whenever she passed the girls' table. The sound of her laugh, real laugh, not the polished one from corporate events, when she managed to make the perfect swirl on top of a hot chocolate. The sun was setting when the last customer left, the bell above the door chiming their departure. Charlotte had just finished washing the final load of dishes, her expensive manicure definitely worse for wear. She dried her hands slowly on a dish towel, taking in the warm glow of the diner's lights and the comfortable silence. Ethan was wiping down the counter while Lily gathered her schoolbooks. The scene was so domestic, so natural, it made Charlotte's throat tight with emotion. Everything she'd been afraid to want was right here in this simple moment. She took a deep breath and walked to the center of the diner. "Ethan, Lily, could you both come here for a minute?" They looked up, curious. Lily bounced over immediately, while Ethan moved more cautiously, dish rag still in hand. To their surprise, Charlotte knelt down on the checkered floor, putting herself at eye level with Lily and looking up at Ethan. Her knees would probably be ruined, but she didn't care anymore about designer clothes or maintaining appearances. "I need to say something important," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "When I first came here, I thought I could treat love like a business deal. I thought I could protect myself by keeping everything controlled and contractual." She swallowed hard. "I was so wrong." Lily reached out and took Charlotte's hand. The simple gesture nearly undid her. "These past weeks with you both, they've shown me what really matters. Not board meetings or stock prices or what people think of me. What matters is this." She squeezed Lily's small hand. "Family, love, real connections." Charlotte looked directly into Ethan's eyes, letting him see every ounce of vulnerability she'd spent years hiding. "No contracts, no money, just us. Will you give me a chance?" The moment stretched out, taut with possibility. Ethan's face softened, years of loneliness and guardedness melting away as he looked at the woman kneeling before him, not the polished CEO, but the real Charlotte, who had stayed up all night holding his daughter's hand. He stepped forward and pulled Charlotte to her feet, drawing her into a tight embrace. She buried her face in his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of coffee and cinnamon that always clung to his clothes. "Now I really have a mommy." Lily's joyful shout echoed through the diner as she threw her arms around both of them. Charlotte laughed through her tears, one arm still around Ethan, while the other wrapped around Lily. For the first time in her life, she felt completely, wonderfully whole. Golden morning light streamed through the freshly cleaned windows of Carter's Diner, now sporting a brand new sign that read, Carter and Hayes Family Diner. The aroma of fresh coffee and baking bread filled the air as Ethan moved confidently behind the gleaming counter, which had been extended to accommodate the growing breakfast crowd. In the corner booth, their special spot, Charlotte sat with Lily, both still in their aprons from helping with the morning prep. Charlotte's usually perfect hair was slightly dusted with flour, and she couldn't have cared less. She watched with pure joy as Lily carefully arranged the silverware on their table, taking her new responsibilities as junior manager very seriously. "Daddy," Lily called out, waving her hand, "the muffins are getting lonely without you." Ethan chuckled, carrying over a fresh basket of blueberry muffins still warm from the oven. The renovation had doubled the kitchen size, allowing him to expand their menu and hire 2 new bakers. But he still made the muffins himself every morning. Some traditions were sacred. "Can't have lonely muffins, can we?" He slid into the booth beside Charlotte, who automatically leaned into him, her corporate armor long since replaced by comfortable authenticity. "I helped mix the batter," Lily announced proudly, reaching for a muffin. "And you did an excellent job," Charlotte praised, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face with natural maternal affection. "Just like you helped Mrs. Henderson with the community garden yesterday." The mention of the garden made Lily beam. The newly established community projects had transformed empty lots into vibrant spaces where neighbors gathered. Charlotte had thrown herself into town improvements with the same dedication she once reserved for corporate takeovers. But now, her strategic mind served a different purpose-building community rather than profit margins. "Tell Daddy about the tomatoes." Lily bounced in her seat, scattering muffin crumbs. "Careful, sweetheart," Ethan reminded gently, but his eyes crinkled with amusement as Charlotte dabbed at the crumbs with a napkin. "We're growing special ones for the sauce," Lily explained, her words tumbling out excitedly. "Mrs. Henderson says they're her heirloom," Charlotte supplied, sharing a warm glance with Ethan. "Yeah, and we're gonna make lots of sauce for the new pasta night." The diner had become more than just a breakfast spot. Evening services now drew crowds from neighboring towns, and their weekly pasta night featuring local ingredients had become a community favorite. The wall near the entrance displayed children's artwork, including Lily's original family drawing that had once sat hidden in Charlotte's desk drawer. "Speaking of pasta night," Ethan said, pulling out his worn recipe notebook, "I was thinking of trying that new recipe you suggested, Charlotte." Charlotte's eyes lit up. "My grandmother's carbonara? You really want to try it?" "Of course," he replied softly. "It's part of our family history now." The word family still made Charlotte's heart skip a beat. She reached for Ethan's hand across the table, remembering how far they'd come from that rainy night when she'd first walked in with her ridiculous proposal. The contract that had started it all was long since torn up, replaced by something far more valuable: trust, love, and the kind of connection money could never buy. "Can I help cook it?" Lily asked, her eyes bright with hope. "We'll all cook it together," Charlotte promised, squeezing Ethan's hand. The morning sun painted warm patterns across their table as they finished breakfast, their conversation flowing easily between Lily's school projects, upcoming diner events, and Charlotte's latest community initiatives. They had found their rhythm, 3 hearts beating in perfect synchronization. As the clock approached opening time, they cleared their plates together, a simple act that symbolized their unity. Lily insisted on carrying the empty muffin basket, while Charlotte and Ethan gathered the rest. "Ready for another day?" Ethan asked, his voice warm with contentment. Charlotte looked around at the diner at the life they'd built together. The new coffee machine she'd insisted on buying hummed steadily. The walls, freshly painted in warm colors Lily had helped choose, glowed in the morning light. The booth cushions, reupholstered in cheerful fabric, waited to welcome their regular customers who had become more like extended family. "More than ready," she replied, meaning so much more than just the day ahead. They walked together to the front door, where the closed sign waited to be turned. Lily squeezed between them, standing on tiptoes to reach the sign. "Together?" she asked, looking up at both her parents with pure love. Ethan placed his hand over Lily's small one on the sign. Charlotte covered both their hands with hers, the simple gold band on her finger catching the light. Together, they answered in unison, and as one family they turned the sign to open, ready to embrace whatever the future might bring. The morning sun streamed through the glass, surrounding them in a gentle glow as they stood there, united in love, faith, and the simple joy of being a family. The diner's bell chimed softly in the background, a familiar sound that now meant home to all three of them. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Ethan Carter, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.